Yeah, so the Trevor Project is the leading national organizer providing crisis intervention and suicide prevention services to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth. You can check them out at thetrevorproject.org to access their services and find out more about their impact or to donate. And you are watching Power Up with Pride 2021, and we are just about ready to get into Bloodstained Ritual of the Night by Dan the VP. So let's take it over to him.
All right. I can try to play Ritual of the Night after this. We're gonna start with Curse of the Moon too, though.
Sorry.
You're completely fine. There's 3 of them at this point, and I get it wrong half the time myself. So
they all sound incredibly vampire-like, anyway.
Yeah, I think that was the point. I think they did an apt job.
They really did.
I'm gonna go ahead and start the run, and then we can chat during the first level because it's a nice little introductory stage. So we're playing on Veteran because some lovely people donated for that. And
Yes.
This is a normal run. And if everything's ready, time's gonna start. I'm gonna give a little countdown. It's gonna start whenever I get control of our main character, Zangetsu. That's gonna be in about 3, 2, 1, go. So this is Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2. It's a sequel to a Kickstarter incentive for Ritual of the Night. And it is very much a throwback, if not a spiritual successor to the classic retro Castlevania games. It controls very much like it is one. When you jump, that's about it. There's no going back. And it dictates a lot of the run, as you will see. But this is our main character, Zangetsu. He's a little less than useful during this run just because his friends all seem to be a little better at the game than he is, but he gets a big fancy sword that we'll get to take advantage of.
Those are always very nice.
Yes. If you're familiar with Curse of the Moon 1 at all, or not, all of these lanterns are color-coded for us in this game. So you kind of know what you're going to get out of them. These yellow and orange lanterns are either going to be points, or they're going to be our weapon power, which is the 19 of 20 number in the top left of the screen. The blue and purple lanterns are going to give sub-weapons. Each lantern can give 1 of 2, depending on which weapon you already have. And then the pink and red lanterns will give us health, which we will need quite a bit through this run. Since we are playing on Veteran, I'll go ahead and kind of point out the differences there. On the casual mode of this game, the devs said, a lot of the retro things are kind of difficult and hard in not very fun ways. So they give you a casual mode to play on, but the hard mode has knockback when you take damage. You start off with a lot less health. You have less weapon points to spend. You don't really have any kind of armor or any of your power-ups to start with, but they're scattered throughout the run instead. So a little more challenging if you're if that's the kind of gameplay experience you want.
So largely same game, but harder.
It is exactly the same game, depending on which episode you're playing. It will be exactly the same on any of the difficulties. Just slight differences to make it a more challenging experience. And we're off to the races with the first boss here. We're just gonna kind of stab and throw our little pinwheel of death. Zangetsu doesn't get any of the really notable secondary weapons at the moment. The biggest advantage to Zangetsu is he's just got a giant health pool, so we're gonna face tank a lot of stuff for a bit. We're gonna have a friend jump in.
I was about to say he takes all that fire really easily.
Yes, he does. That's a key part of a lot of these boss fights, is really utilizing health as a resource. And if you're familiar with the series, or maybe some of the original Castlevania games, we're going to get friends. This is Dominique. She's going to come play with us, and we're going to kind of put Zangetsu to the back for a bit, because she can pogo and jump really high.
Now I'm interested.
The main difference so far is Zangetsu does do a little bit more melee damage, and he attacks more quickly. So as much as I joke, he is pretty important for most of the run. But he is usually the most dispendable character. This game does have a checkpoint system, and you can respawn at a checkpoint to revive any of your characters you've lost. So there are lots of occasions that if I know or think I'm going to take a death, I will swap to Zangetsu, just because he's the least needed to access the optimal routes through this game. Which those routes are a big part of the speed run. There's a lot of intended routes and a lot of less than intended routes that we're going to utilize because we can. Like this one right here. The levels are very... I don't want to say they're different based on which episode you're playing, but there are 4 episodes to play in this game, which largely all play through the same stages. But you have different characters and abilities, so the kind of prescribed routes change. But we can access a lot of the routes in this, which is episode 1, depending on what characters we have and what abilities we use to get there.
And can you explain what you mean when you say episodes? Like, are these different parts of the story, or are they just different versions of the same levels?
Sure. There's they broke this game out, and by they I mean Inti Creates, which is the studio that created the Bloodstained series. The first Curse of the Moon game was just a Kickstarter incentive for Ritual of the Night, and it was, you know, a very linear stage 1 through stage 8. There were a couple different endings, but it was very much a recreation of the more retro experience. With this game, there are up to 4 episodes, depending on which ending you get in previous episodes. They mainly all exist in the same stages. There are some extra stages here or there, but you are playing with different characters. You have some different abilities depending on the episode you're in. The bosses get harder in some of the episodes. So it's a bit of both.
Okay.
And speaking of bosses, this is the boss for stage 2, which we really don't know how it works. There's some phantom hitboxes that this ability I'm using with Dominique will hit on the edge and the bottom of the screen, and we just kind of go with it because the boss dies very quickly.
If it works, it works.
Yes. This is the perfect time to mention shout outs to Captain Brian, who's researched basically every square inch of this game. He's basically the reason we have most of the knowledge we do. But that's the one thing I know that he's admitted he has no idea how it works. You're gonna
Sounds like a gift to the community. Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, it is definitely a gift, and for anybody out there that might kind of struggle to find a place in a speedrunning community, it is invaluable to have people that are willing and or have the technical knowledge to really dissect a game. So we've got our next teammate. His name is Robert. The most important thing about him is he has a very, very large gun. We're not going to use him too much, but when he gets his big gun, we can make some magic happen.
It's a very important skill, having a big gun.
Yes. some of the more time-saving strats later in this run really depend on getting a lot of variety in our platforming. And Robert's big gun will allow him just a little bit extra vertical height, which gets us to places we're not necessarily supposed to be in this episode. He can also crawl, which, I mean, I guess that's a life skill.
Very important too, sometimes, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know why everybody can't crawl, but, you know, I'm not going to question their preferred method of travel.
I imagine someone named Sangetsu with a very big sword has a lot of pride too. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, that, you know what they say about guys with big swords.
Exactly. So, if we have the time, I actually have one donation I'd like to
Sure.
We were speaking of very vampire-like names, and we have $50 from Super Blood Wolf Moon. So thank you very much for that. Just wanted to get that in there.
Awesome. So this is kind of our first look at some platforms on a global cycle. Most of the platforms in this game are on kind of a pseudo-global cycle. They start when you first encounter them, whatever room that's in, which, because there are branching paths, that can be different based on what path you take. But then that basically starts the global cycle. So this level, we've only got them in one place. Later on in the game, kind of a race against the clock once you turn on the platforms to kind of get where you need to be at an optimal cycle.
So can you talk a little bit about the graphics? These are very deliberately retro, and you said that was part of it, but they went like very deliberately for a very old-fashioned style here.
Yes, and I won't make a fool of myself and try to remember specific people, but part of the team at Inti Creates were kind of the original game designers for the Castlevania games, and so this is kind of their continuation of that franchise, and these specifically to kind of emulate the NES Castlevania games.
Yeah, okay, so it's a very callback to their careers as well.
Yes, it's definitely very intentional, and the first in this series being a Kickstarter incentive was simply meant to just raise money for Ritual of the Night, and so it was more of a, I don't want to call it a marketing ploy, but it was, you know, hey, here's a game that you really don't see anymore from the original creators. Let's make another one.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that is where Kickstarter tends to do best, is these little revival projects.
I would agree, yeah. So one of the most important parts of the game is happening, and that is we're getting the final member of our party. And he's a corgi, drives a mech. And if I need to explain why that's important, I mean, he's a corgi.
I am very interested in the corgi driving a mech.
Whenever they released the game, the devs actually kind of talked about each character individually, and they were worried that they gave this character too much. But then they were like, you know, it's fun, we all enjoy it, why not give him everything? So this is Hachi. And we're going to play a lot in this next level with Hachi. It is an ice level, and Hachi has spike shoes, so he doesn't slip around on the ice. He also gets a little gear whenever he's climbing up and down stairs. He can hover and gets little, like, plane jets and wings. He's the only character in this episode that can break through these breakable walls, like this one up here. He's got the highest single melee damage, and he doesn't get interchangeable secondary weapons, but he can just become invincible, and it slowly drains down the weapon points when he's using that.
It's a very powerful corgi.
Yes. He's a bit slow, so when we're not utilizing his kind of utilities, we're not going to be on him that much. You can see the other characters kind of slide around on the ice. And we get our first good look at Robert's big gun, which I'm going to use again right here to slide along the ice. It's a very large gun.
It is. It's like the size of his torso.
Yes. We're going to use it a couple more times in this level, and then it'll be a staple. It also is the single highest damage output in the game, so we're going to utilize it on a couple bosses. Start to see how really using all the characters really kind of sequence together now that we've got everybody from the high jump on Dominique to the hover on Hachi, and now the big gun on Robert, which gives us a little bit extra boost. Things just start to flow. We're going to pick up another upgrade, which we've gotten 2 so far. The second level, we got an upgrade to our weapon points. It took our point total from a max of 20 to a max of 30. Got a health upgrade in stage 3. And we got another upgrade to our weapon points in stage 4. If we were on the casual difficulty, we would have started with all of these upgrades, and then we could have gotten them again. So you basically get double up on those in casual. Last little section until get to this boss. I used an ability on Zangetsu that's probably his most useful ability. It's the Demon Essence, and it carries over to all the characters once it's used for a limited time, and it's just going to add 1 point of damage to all of our basic attacks. It's going to give Hachi just a little bit more power. There's a couple of minor optimizations on this boss that don't involve Hachi, but the ice is very slippery, and so kind of safe strat is just punching her in the face.
Sometimes you just gotta go simple.
Yeah. You're gonna see another little speed tech at the end of this. Hachi is so big and his basic attack is so slow, we're gonna be able to get double attacks on the boss here. It doesn't happen too often in this game, but when it does, it's we're gonna burn through the end of this boss pretty quick right here. And much like its retro counterparts, you can't move and attack at the same time. If I'm holding left or right and attack, it's gonna stop. So there's a lot of jump attacking that happens in this game, and it's pretty precise. I don't want to call it tech, but if the attack animation is still happening when you hit the ground, you lose all your momentum. So it's really, each character has a different kind of length to their attack animation. Really learning each character and when you need to attack while you're in air to not lose any time once you land is a big part of this run. But we're on to stage 5 and things kind of heat up here. A lot more risky strats, a lot of chance to just kind of die. A lot of damage boosts are going to be happening. There's a pretty tricky strat with the big gun right here. And we got it.
Nice.
I need to grab some extra weapon points here. I'm a little bit low. So I'm just going to take this nice and slow. This level is highly optimized around one specific path. So if I need to take extra time to get more weapon points so I can access that path, is well worth it. And this is one of those sections. It's a very tight section. If at any point in time you're not just holding right, this entire sequence does not work. Shout out to yesterday, the current world record holder for that series of rooms.
Yeah, it's almost like an auto-scroller at this point.
Yes, and that's a lot of the optimal movement and a lot of the kind of speedrun routing. Once you get the kind of the basic structure of the level down is, what do I need to do to hold right? And it sounds a lot simpler than it is. And it also should be noted that swapping characters, you'll probably notice that whenever I swap characters, it pauses the game like slightly. And that's actually a big consideration in the routing. It's about half a second every time you swap a character. You lose RTA. And so optimizing what character you're on at every point in time and who you need to be on next and when you get there, it's really important.
So does that affect the global timer you were talking about earlier?
It doesn't affect the global timer, and it's not, as far as we can tell, it's not counted in the in-game time, which is the main reason why the speedrun of this is RTA. But no, it doesn't affect the in-game timer.
Oh, I can imagine it adds like a little minute or something with how much you're doing it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely noticeable, and in the routing there are a few things that we just don't do because it's not worth having to swap 3 or 4 times one way and then 3 or 4 times another. So we're gonna have some fun with Robert in this boss. I'm gonna try to predict when it's gonna come out of the lava. Kind of random, but there are some patterns. All right, the top we can only get 1 shot on. When it comes out the bottom, we can get 2, possibly. There we go. You've got to shoot before it comes out to even be able to get it on that first one. We get the tail here, which is not what we want, but we'll make do. Each boss, as you've probably noticed, has a desperation attack, if you will, which you can't die during this unless you're on the difficulty above this, which is a whole nother story. But I'm also spending all of my weapon points at the end of each level because the game will count it down and add it to your points total if you have any left over.
Yes, it's like
optimizations.
It's like landing at the bottom of the flagpole.
Yes. There's a couple of levels that you can, I think it saves like half a second if you don't have enough points to get a 1-up, but it's really only the first and second level that you can actually achieve that. And things are just going to keep getting a little bit more complex and a little bit more difficult for the last couple of stages. I want to ride this mimic. Alright. Stage 6 is probably the most infamous stage in the speedrun because the boss is kind of the big RNG gate of this run. It's really smoothed out for marathon purposes because there's a really safe strat. So it won't take long, but it'll probably lose about 20 seconds compared to optimal strats, which really revolve around getting a very specific RNG pattern. We're gonna pick up Big Lance again. Dominique can access some of these places.
I gotta say, riding the angry mimic was not a strategy I'd expect.
You know, that was not one of the things in this game that I figured out myself. That was whenever I saw that in kind of the early stages of routing this game, I was very impressed. And it's very satisfying to do as well.
I can imagine. That's not how it usually goes when I play Dark Souls.
Yeah, not so much. We're going to use some more big gun strats, and then we're going to use the power of crawling to just kind of dodge these enemies. A lot of stuff in the game has started doing quite a bit of damage. We're going to get an armor upgrade in the next level, which will reduce all the damage we take by 1, but as of right now, everything is pretty deadly. Got a couple tough rooms coming up. Gotta make this skip happen. And then this room is very particular. Luckily, we've got a little spin to win action. At the end of the 4th level, Zangetsu finally found his big boy sword. So that it's worth noting, mostly because once he has the upgraded sword, all of his secondary weapons are upgraded as well, which is why the demon essence there now lets him spin. Does quite a bit more damage as well. So this is the big RNG factor boss, and it's going to move left and right and spawn some pillars that we can stand on. The pillars are consistent, his movement isn't. So, you know, ideally we'd be hitting him with Zangetsu, but we're just going to use Robert's Rapid Scarf. And you can mash for this attack, or you can just hold it down. Mashing saves 1 frame per attack. So it is optimal, but it's really not a huge factor. There's no place in the speed run where mashing saves you more than, 10 frames. So that was actually a really good pattern we got. I was able to use Zangetsu at the end. So, marathon luck. Let's go.
Best time to have it.
Yeah. All right, we've got 2 more stages left, and stage 7 will be the big global timer platform cycle stage. So hopefully we can get through this in the amount of time that I'd like to. So we see the platforms here. That's going to start the global cycle. Which it's kind of, the global cycle, it kind of helps you and it hurts you, because if you have small mistakes, you really don't lose time until you get past kind of that threshold that you miss the cycle. So it is kind of a forgiving aspect. Because like all of this little missing the stairs right there isn't really going to punish me, because I'm still going to be on the same cycle when we get to the room that it matters. I do have to make sure I'm getting through all of this.
So then it's forgiving right up until you miss the cycle.
Yes. I had to swap to Dominique there because I was a little bit behind, but Dominique gave me the big jump. I really enjoy how this level flows.
It's very smooth.
A couple of sections here and there. There is, probably go ahead and mention this before we get there. And this is the big cycle right here. We made it in time. Platform is there for us. So coming up is probably the biggest skip in the game. It's at least probably a minute and a half, if not 2. and it's going to be kind of exploiting an area that we're not meant to be in this episode, with a big team up between Dominique and Hachi and Robert. So we've got to get this whole next set of screens have to be done in one sequence to get the frog to spawn correctly. So and there it is.
Very nice.
If at any point in time you don't kill a frog, or you're not holding right the entire time the last frog spawn will not line up. And that the weapon we have on Dominique is a cyclone that has a bit of a tailwind. So that's how you're able to get kind of the super jump in the cyclone to get the height, and then use the big gun to get that little bit left.
So that was very precise. That was very impressive.
Yeah, it's I don't want to say it's the most precise thing in this game, because there's a couple of things that are just kind of sneakily hard, but it is a very precise trick.
And that one was very visually impressive too.
Yes, it's probably the most impressive trick. I'd give it that. So we're getting good patterns so far on Grimmery, which is a reused boss from Curse of the Moon 1. I'm not going to ask questions about what enemies and demons from the moon can do in there after their death, but we do see this boss again. Made pretty quick work.
Sometimes you just have a hobby and you want to keep indulging, so they come back.
Yeah. Which, spoiler alert for kind of the rest of this game. You do basically fight the moon. It's kind of the last boss in this game, so, you know, if you like space or something, maybe try this game out.
That is a hilarious sentence, and I'm glad I got to hear it.
Yeah, you literally fight the moon. I don't know where they're going to go from there, but...
Well, there's Saturn.
Yeah. Alright, so I apologize in advance for the bit rate for a lot of this level, but, you know, you gotta have rain every now and then in an 8-bit game.
Is it truly a goth emo vampire game if it's not pouring at some point?
Exactly. This level is the last stage, and as such is kind of by far the most demanding. We're kind of on the clock the entire level with our health as a resource, with our weapon points as a resource, and dying, we really can't recoup the sub-weapons we lose if we die, so all of these sequences have a high chance of failure. There is kind of a safe room at the end that lets you kind of reset and get anything you might have lost for the final boss, which is very much appreciated. Trying not to talk too much because I'd rather execute well, because this stage is pretty impressive. Done right.
For sure. I can do a little blurb reading.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yep. Okay, then we got, you're watching Winter Pride 2021 here on Twitch, running from December 3rd through the 5th for 24 hours each day, benefiting the Trevor Project. To find more about them, you can find the link on their site in the panels below the stream, or you can use !charity. If you're interested in donating, you can type !donate in chat, find the schedule by using !schedule, or incentives with !incentives. Yeah, and we have partnered with the Yeti to bring you shirts based on various runs throughout the event. These awesome designs will only be around as long as the marathon is, so make sure you pick them up now. $5 from each shirt sale goes directly to the Trevor Project. You can visit theyeti.com to check them all out.
Alright, perfect timing. We're on the last climb here, which this is more of just for an effect, because you can just use the one ability on Dominique to get all the way up. And we're coming up to the last bit of the game. We've got 2 phases of the last boss fight. We're gonna get to see basically everybody except for Dominique. She's only gonna give us a little jump at the end, but we're fighting Beelzebub in this episode, so there's that.
That's fairly intense.
There's gonna be a lot of bugs happening.
Oh no. Oh, was that the thing that was like pouring down from the ceiling and so on? Is that just a big pile?
Yeah, those are all bugs.
Oh my god, that's so gross. I love it.
Yeah. Need to watch my health here and make sure I don't die on phase 1. We're just gonna use Hachi because he's a big boy. So we're gonna spawn the boss on this pillar. Get behind him. So this is phase 1. I'm gonna go to the real fight. Once we get into the fight, things are gonna end pretty quickly. So once the health bar reaches 0 will be time. I'll try to call it, but we're just gonna spam with Robert if we get him set up on the right pixel. So time is coming soon-ish. Robert, do your thing. All right, time's gonna be up in 3, 2, 1, time. I was almost to 34. That was nice.
Very good.
I'm happy with that. Very much.
That was very impressive to watch. Thank you very much for doing that.
I think that was no deaths, which is pretty for a marathon run of this. I'm more than pleased with. Just some quick shout outs. The Blacktastic, Bobby, the man himself, with some runs later today. A huge part of the speedrunning community. Strizer86, Laxus, yesterday the current world record holder for this category, the Japanese runner. If the game at all interests you, we've got a great little speedrunning community around this game, the first and Ritual of the Night. There is a trainer for this game and the prequel on PC, so you can literally spawn anything at any point in time and practice things at your fingertip. It's a really great tool. Shout out again to Captain Brian for that. I stream occasionally on Twitch, so we do lots of retro speedruns and such. So if you want to drop me a follow, that would be appreciated. And thanks to everybody who puts this together. Huge shout out for letting me get a run in and be a part of helping to raise some money for such a great cause. That's going to do it for me. Enjoy the rest of the marathon.
Thank you again very much, Dan, for coming around. That was a pleasure to watch. Very, very cool. Now, for the next thing coming up, we have something a little bit less gothic. We have Mickey's Speedway USA by Garby the Glitcherous, who is making a return here. And while we're getting all of that set up, I am just going to talk a little bit about the Trevor Project so we can all appreciate who we're supporting here. The Trevor Project is the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning young people. The organization works to save young lives by providing support through free and confidential suicide prevention and crisis intervention programs on platforms where young people spend their time. Their 24/7 phone lifeline, chat, text, and soon-to-come integrations with social media platforms. They also run Trevor Space, the world's largest safe space social networking site for LGBTQ youth, and operate innovative education, research, and advocacy programs.